This is the Impressions Exchange Podcast. Where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, I'm Denise Gustafson, Editorial Director for Printing United Alliance, and the guest host for the special Printing Impressions podcast series in celebration of Women's History Month, highlighting women in the printing industry. During this series, I'll have the opportunity to talk with women from all segments of the industry about their experiences and their journey as a woman in the industry. So today, it's my pleasure to welcome Dee Dee Davis. She's the owner of Decor Print. So Dee Dee, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Very good. Can you tell me a little bit about Decor Print and what you do as its owner?
Decor Print actually started in 2012, and it started as a side hustle. I was actually working in the corporate world of fashion bedding. So how this arrived was in that world, I was a product development senior designer, and one of my roles was I needed to get fabric printed for our sales meetings. And a lot of our sales meetings were with some very high-end retail bigwigs like Bed Bath & Beyond, Macy's, Target, Sears when Sears was here, Kmart, Walmart, and even Dollar General, which is a big player. So in that role for several years, I had some previous experience from a different company, actually with hands-on fabric printing. But in this new role, I was just kind of put in charge of it. And I worked for a company that was on Fifth Avenue in New York. They had small offices. They had no room for printing equipment. So I outsourced everything. And during that time period of outsourcing, we started kind of overwhelming the limited number of people that were in the USA to print fabric. There really were just maybe 3 in the USA that I could call up and ask them to do contract printing for us for fabric. And during that time period, we were just overwhelming people. And I realized one day I had an epiphany that the company that I was working for really needed to buy their own equipment. I went to my bosses and said, hey, let's buy some printing equipment because we need to do this in-house. We'll get it done faster and cheaper, basically, in the long run. And they said no. And I said, okay, well, let me think about this because we really need it. I kind of pondered it for a day or two, and I realized I was like, okay, what if I buy the equipment? And I just set up my own little side business. I'll print the fabric for our projects because we have to have it for these sales meetings that are multi-million-dollar sales meetings. And that's how it started. I bought my first printer in 2012, and it was a pigment printer. And this printer did wide format printing. So I could print about 54 inches to possibly around 56 inches wide. And it was roll to roll. So what that means is I could, continue up the length of the roll printing for 10 yards, 20 yards, whatever I needed. That was the first printer. And that's how it came to be, like how I actually started the business. It was kind of a little bit of got a fire lit under me because I really wanted to make it work and figure it out. And I also just wanted the company I was working for at the time, I really wanted us to have less reliance on outsourcing all of the fabrics to other vendors.
So how did it become more than a side hustle?
It was a little slow in the beginning because the first year, I had reactive printing experience on fabric from a previous job that I had worked at for 10 years, but the new technology with nanopigment and learning like a new printer and new RIP software and just the whole process, it took me about a year to feel confident. So after that year, just printing for the corporate company that I worked for, and it was my equipment, so I could start putting out the word. I basically started calling friends in the industry that did fashion bedding, and I did the same thing. I said, "Do y'all need sampling for your sales meetings or for market? We have these two markets, and it's like a big trade show that, everyone shows their products, and a lot of it digitally printed fabric that's being shown to just show the color and ideas of the new designs." So that's how it started. I just called my friends and my network of people that I knew. And that's how the business really started. And then I started going to trade shows, just handing out my card and showing some designs that I printed. And people started reacting because there weren't that many people doing it, number one. So that's how it became less of a side hustle and became more of a true business.
How did you get involved in fashion bedding in the first place? Because
That's a good, that's so niche. How that came to be is I've always been fascinated with fabric. My mother owned a really fabulous fabric store when I was growing up, and it was called Unique Textiles. And she had that business for over 10 years. And during that time, like I kind of grew up in that store, and I was so fascinated by all the color and the designs. And it was like a kid in a candy store with all of these beautiful fabrics constantly and touching and feeling. It's so tactile. And they were all fashion fabrics. So they're very luxe feeling. So that's how my like love of fabric started. And then I graduated. I went to school at NC State, and NC State is a fabulous school. They have a college of textiles. So the College of Textiles, they really focus on textile product development, engineering, chemistry of all textiles. And then they also have a merchandising and fashion program. I went to graduate school and got my degree, and a lot of my classes were with the textile program. And then a lot of it was also with the design school. So it was kind of like a blended hybrid degree that I got for my graduate degree. But that's how I kind of got into that. And then after I graduated, I worked at corporate textile companies doing design work.
that is definitely interesting.
Yeah. And what your listeners didn't hear before is like I told you, I said, my story is very unique, and I'm kind of like a unicorn of business owners that got into the fabric business.
But honestly, unicorns are the best.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're very unique.
Definitely. I'm not as familiar with fashion bedding and some of the textile manufacturing side of things, but I know in the printing industry, we tend to skew a little bit more heavily male.
Yes, yes.
So is that something that's very similar on the textile side of things? I mean, it's manufacturing, so I would assume so.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. There are a lot of women in that industry, but where they're mainly situated is in the design and product development because it's very creative. There's a lot of artwork involved. There's art, color, texture. There's a lot more women there than on the heavy production side.
for you as a woman that has moved fully into the printing industry, granted it's textile printing industry, have you had to deal with any challenges because of being a woman in printing?
I believe the answer is probably yes. But what I've done, I just deflect any of that off because what I realized along the way, you cannot take anything personally in this business. keep your chin up and keep moving forward, because no matter what, there's a lot of rejection in the world of like, whether you want the sale or you're having a difficult time, like getting someone to call you back, a vendor that you really need to talk to you. It's just, you just got to keep on pressing on and just keep trying.
And sometimes it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Kind of along the same thought and line is, how do you think we can really try to get a more or build a better inclusive industry, whether it's in textile printing, whether it's strictly in the printing industry? Because I think that's one of it's getting better. From
Yeah.
when we've started so
Yeah.
many years ago to now.
Yeah.
But are there any particular ways that you think that we can get an industry that is more inclusive or diverse?
Just in general with the industry, I feel like there are pockets in the United States at least, and even like in globally, that printing is more known. I feel like it's like sometimes like the printing world is just this unknown entity,
The
um,
best kept secret is what I keep telling people.
that people don't even, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's almost invisible to a certain degree, because I just know like most young people, they're trying to figure out what they want to do and what their path forward is. But it's all about exposure. And the question is, how do you expose people to it? One of the ways that I do that, I try, is I work with some high schools in my city of Fort Mill, South Carolina. There are two high schools that actually have what they call like a graphics program track. The kids at the school get exposed to different things in their graphics lab. And, they have a little dye sub printer, and they've got a little sticker printer, and they're making some banners in their high school, which is pretty neat, right? With equipment. But one of the things they do is they ask me as a business owner that, hey, we want to get the kids into an actual working environment. Every semester, send a new teen, probably a senior, to come work here and just intern basically. We try to expose them to different things but there are women, and some of those women are very good. And so I'm just doing my best here, just trying to at least just have exposure to both men and women to the printing industry, even though what I do is it's very unique, it's kind of unicorn, but some of the things that we do here, someone could take that knowledge and go to a signage manufacturer pretty easily and kind of understand the process. What are we doing here? What are we making?
Yeah, the process doesn't change too much
Yeah,
from
it's
business
still,
to business.
yeah, it's still printing. It's laying down ink on some kind of media or substrate to basically resell. We're in the business to print with inks and some kind of either textile media or paper media.
I have to say that you are very fortunate to have the high schools and the programs that are close to you, because that's something that I've noticed and observed over the last several years, is a lot of those programs are going away. I had one growing up in my high school. I've talked to other women that have had similar, they've had a very similar, they've learned it in high school, had able to do
Yeah.
hands-on work, but those programs are gone now. So
Yeah.
the fact that you have two close to you is,
Yeah.
you are so fortunate.
Yeah. No. And we touched on this earlier before you started the conversation, but you and I had something similar. When I was a teenager, I worked on my high school newspaper first. And then I went to college and I worked on the college newspaper, waxing the paste up layouts and with X-Acto knives and everything. That was my first kind of experience with that world. It's really important. I feel like exposure of like the young people, getting people to put eyes on it, because it's a fun industry. I think It's always challenging and it's changing constantly. It never gets boring.
Definitely. And it's so creative. And
It
I
is
don't,
creative.
and
Yes.
a lot of people don't really understand really what's involved. So the fact that you can get these kids exposed to it, male or female, it doesn't matter, but get them exposed to it and get their mind working about, oh, so that's what goes behind that sign or that banner or whatever it is. I didn't realize there was a whole industry behind that because I think that's where you were saying earlier, people just don't see it anymore. They don't understand how that sign gets to where it is. One of the things that you have an opportunity to do as well with these kids is you're in a leadership role. You're an owner of a company. How important is it for people starting out to be able to have or look up to women in the C-suite as an owner of a business?
That is a hard question because I try I try to be a good role model for if there's a kid coming through and even our regular employees as a female. I feel like it's just I try to just be a good human to tell you the truth and make good decisions without it having any kind of conflict, whether you're female or male. Maybe that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but basically, I try to be just the best human possible so that people appreciate just working for someone that has isn't a jerk, basically. And there are moments as an owner where you're just very exasperated with just people in general. And you have moments and you just have like things catch up with you and people are exasperating, people do things wrong. But as I grow into this, I try to learn how to be a better owner, operator. And as a woman, I do think it's important because, we get judged more, obviously, than men about how we act and react, how our tone comes across. And it's not always easy to tell you the truth. I've had guys work for me and they just don't like working for females. You can just tell it really hard for them. But I think over time they find some appreciation for the relationship and then I just grow on them and they can't help but like me. And I don't think it's any I feel like it's just a cultural thing and we'll be up against it for a very, very long time. I mean, it could be like 4 generations from now before, but do we really want things to be gender neutral? I don't know. I think women are very unique and we have a special way of reacting to things and dealing with things than men do. So I think that's a good question for future generations is do we really want to be just a neutral entity?
I think it would be good for some of the reactions to be more, not neutral, but maybe similar. For instance, you have a woman that might be a little aggressive or have a strong personality, and some people might view that very negatively.
Yes.
But if you have a man that literally does the same thing,
Yeah. It's not a
same
problem.
and it's not a problem. So then the question is why?
Yeah.
I think that's where I would like to see the
Yeah.
equality be.
Yeah. Maybe the why is because there's just not as many women out there
Mhm.
doing it. Like we were talking about, it's kind of, yeah, I mean, there are millions and millions of women out there running small businesses, but the print industry, like you said, it's mostly made up of men, right? Because there's a lot of men in it. I mean, I'm not really sure why there's so many men in it. I think as we go along, maybe it will even out, but maybe not in my lifetime.
Part of, I think, the answer to that question goes back to just the roles of men and women back decades. I mean, you look in the 50s, it was the wife stays home, the man goes to work. It's not until more recent decades that we've really seen that change with more women entering the workforce. Part of it is because of need. just with the cost of things and the cost of inflation. Most couples need to have both people working.
Right.
And
Yes.
also women are like, well, I don't necessarily want to start a family. That's not my path. I want a career. So there's been those, I think those cultural changes have also influenced how many more women we do see in business roles, in the workforce. But then you look at what happened during COVID. Most of the jobs that were lost were women
Yeah.
because they ended up playing that more traditional role of, well, there's kids at home. The wife needs to be home to take care of the kids. She's the mom.
Yeah.
So we still have it, obviously, but maybe, yeah, we don't want general neutral, but everybody brings different qualities to their roles. And I think that's where the strength of it is in an industry, in a company.
I agree. Definitely.
Because you were raised differently than I was raised. So we could be two women in the same company and have two very different opinions. Same thing with men. They are raised differently. They have a different perspective. And it's all those different perspectives that really help to bring strength. Now, part of the thing that I know we're talking about is women's roles, men's roles. Women tend to have that more mothering instinct. They have that in some ways, the ticking clock of they want to get a family started. How difficult is it sometimes to have the career, have the family life, and have that a real work-life balance for women?
It's pretty impossible. It's an impossible standard unless you have a C-suite job where you can afford a nanny to take care of your kids. There's a lot of stress for women. I was just thinking about it the other day. All of my friends that still have kids, they're scrambling to get their kids in camp right now. It's like in January, they were stressing out because all the camps are full for early registration and these camps are super expensive. But this is so you're thinking so far ahead for the summer. And this is something that women have to do. And I find that the dads aren't thinking about it. Those are the extra things that women have to take on constantly. And then a lot of times getting your kid to the doctor in the middle of the day when you're trying to work and keeping your kids fed and healthy. It's not easy. You got to give major props to any working mom, right? I was a mom. I still am a mom, but my child is officially an adult now. So that's a lot of freedom for me. There comes a time when I started my business, my child was in junior high school. So they're very much more independent. So I didn't really have to worry about the younger child care parts, which are much more difficult. That made it a little bit easier for me to start this business and really focus on 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. A lot of times at the very beginning, first couple of years were really a lot of hours, just double timing because I was working my regular job too, because I was still working with my corporate job while I was starting my side business, Decor Print. And so I did that for another 5 years as side hustle. And then in 2019, I fully committed to just being at my business, Decor Print. It's tricky.
It's very tricky. And I know for some women that I've talked to, there's a lot of guilt that also happens as you're not,
Yeah.
are you not spending
Yeah.
enough time with your kids and helping
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
versus you're not spending enough time in the
Yeah.
business and doing that as well.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah. It's very tough. I I have those feelings like everybody, but I just go, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about it and then just move on. Because if you dwell upon it too much, it will make you crazy. You've got other things to do than just have a pity party. But we're just busy people. If you're a working mom, man, you have a lot of balls in the air, you're juggling, and you're really good at multitasking. And women are fabulous multitaskers. That's why I always encourage people. I'm like, you really need to hire a woman because man, women can multi, if you want something done, ask a woman to do it. I mean, I know that's very general, but I love that we are multitaskers and we can do all these things. But it's not easy. We put a lot of stress on ourselves. We pile some of these things on, but some of them are piled onto us. We have no choice.
And I guess part of it too is looking at our support system, our network, our
Yeah.
connections, our community. How important is having that kind of, whether it's a
Yeah.
professional network or
Yeah.
some community support, how important is that for you as a woman and a business owner?
You have to have help wherever you can find it, and someone who's willing to pick up the phone and talk to you even. So even as a woman, if you have children, you need help with childcare. Childcare is really tricky. It's very expensive. And there's also the one thing with childcare, I remember when I worked my corporate job, I had to rush out at quitting time. Like I couldn't stay late typically because I had to be at daycare before 6 to pick up my child. And if my child was over 30 minutes away, and if you're stuck, you gotta just have a cutoff and go pick up your kids, right? And then you got to get your kids on to school on time. There's definite things there where you need help sometimes. And then with business, having a business network where I can pick up the phone and call my favorite soundboard. I have a couple of them where I call them and just ask for advice because I trust their opinion. And sometimes those relationships take time to develop, that I can pick up the phone and call some. And sometimes it comes from vendors. I have relationships with vendors and I call them and talk to them. And then some of them, we become friends because I'm calling them so much, asking questions and advice. But yeah, I definitely need that. The business that we're in, like we were talking about, it can be a little wild west, and there's some things are not very standardized, and you're looking for people who have done it before, and do they know anything about how to do it? Because sometimes you get asked to do these custom projects that no one's ever done before, or if someone did it, there's not any record of how they did it anywhere. So sometimes a vendor will know, and they'll kind of glean some advice and some ideas of how it could be done.
They're a great resource.
Yeah, they are. They're great. I appreciate all of them.
As we're kind of wrapping up, I'm going to ask you probably what my favorite question is that I ask everyone, and kind of our conclusion. Knowing what you know now, with all the different things that you've done in your career, from fashion bedding to starting your own side hustle to actually coming fully into the print industry and being an owner and an entrepreneur, what advice would you give yourself if you were just starting out today?
I would say stay small for as long as you can until you feel like it's impossible. Because once you start growing, there are more layers of difficulty and problems that you're basically compounding on yourself as you grow. To stay small as long as you can until you have a real handle on all of your processes and understand everything that goes into it as much as you can, and try to understand the bigger picture of, if you buy this $300,000 printer, how is that going to complicate your business? Because it does. As you grow and you take on capital expenditures, and it's more stressful, but it's also fun. But I would tell myself to go slow and take your time with it. You don't have to grow really fast. And that would be my best advice.
You don't have to run.
You
You
don't have to
can.
run, but unless the business is just being dumped on you and you really have to run, go for it. But a lot of the print industry, the equipment is very expensive that we're working with. And then our talent is very expensive. that we're bringing in and training and the time. There's a lot more involved that I ever imagined at the very beginning of this whole industry. When I started my own business, I had no idea that where I was going to be 10 years later. I've grown like quite a bit. And I think I'm at a point where I'd like to keep growing. But now that I have all of this knowledge of what is that very expensive printer do to my business and how does that affect everything, I'm a little bit more cautious about spending a lot of money on big equipment, because you know that another big piece of equipment takes training and floor space. There's all these things that and nuances that I just never imagined until now.
And it's things that you learn along the way.
You really do learn along the way. Yeah.
Well, Dee Dee, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. So thank you so much for taking
Thank
the
you,
time.
Denise. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks again.